All right, so welcome everybody to another episode of the Let's See Forget podcast, a historical podcast by Tenement Yard Media. I'm your host Davey, and just a bit of disclaimer, right? This episode is like a part one to a 2-part series. Is me ever say so? This is supposed to come out in May, so the episode that this accompanies is gonna come out the week after, right? And this is one of the longest episodes I have written here. Both those 2 episodes. It's almost exactly 6 years. I'm gonna go exactly 6 years. Let me tell you, 5 years. 5 years. In from when I started writing this episode to when you're hearing it, right? So this episode we're gonna talk a bit about Mike Henry, specifically Mike Henry business, one of his businesses that made a major impact on Jamaica, right? Now, what happened was I was working on something else, right? Way back in late 2020. And I couldn't get any accurate information about it. Like this situation had to do with 1970s, which if you're a long-time listener of Let's See Forget podcast, you know I hate talking about that period, right? Because again, accurate information. Just too much. That's too much sometimes, as me ever say. And the only person who was alive at the time who witnessed this particular incident was Mike Henry. Is in Mike Henry and a couple of people, but Mike Henry was like the public figure involved, right? He was like one of the few public figures who was alive, who was involved. So made some calls, as me ever said, I'm contacts over JLP, which is Jamaica Labour Party, the political party that Mike Henry is associated with, for non-Jamaicans who are listening. And I remember being on the phone with him. This was like April 2021. It took a while to get him, but I did get him. And I remember being on the phone with him and asking him some series of questions and stuff like that. But Mike Henry wears an hearing aid, right? And he asks if where my base and stuff, and it so happened that, I live in Kingston. And then, he live in the hills, Kingston and St. Andrew Hills. Is me ever say, and him just asked him if like would that be much more easier for set up a place and time where him can just come and talk, since it was gonna be recorded, because I was already recording the phone call that I had with him. So I'm just like, it just can just forward, bring what you want, bring, and we just have like an in-person conversation and stuff like that. So I'm just like, cool. So me, couple of people from Tenement Yard, we drive up to his home and stuff like that. And, we just, set up a whole audio-visual situation, and we started to ask him questions about this particular incident. And, but the thing was that the camera that we were working with, every 30 minutes, you had to, completely reset it. Is me trying to say? So during the resetting, we'd have these breaks where Mike was just still talking. Is me trying to say? And I remember he asked something he said something to the point of what we do and stuff like that. We're just like, we do a history podcast and stuff like that. And he goes, do you ever hear about Nyamburgers? Them tell me, I don't know shit. I said, no. I said, no, I don't know what it. And he just he made a comment where he said sometimes we feel like he might go mad because it seems like nobody remember this restaurant. And he was telling us the history of it and how big it was and stuff like that. History kind of sketchy, as me ever say, but him did I really tell you how big it was and how popular it was and stuff like that. And and we never get it pan video or audio again, because we still did that setup and him still did that talk. Is me ever say. But yeah, end up reset and stuff and conversation in. Is me run the restaurant. And we went back to what we were talking about, this particular incident. And I remember when we were getting ready to go, I did ask Mike Henry if he can put in a word for me at his publishing company because I need a copy of Mirror, like a physical copy of Mirror, because I never had, that's Rex Nettleford book, because I didn't have a physical copy, and if you can see if they have one upstock and stuff like that. And just you can just go directly to the factory. And he gave me a note to take up to the factory, to take up to the headquarters and stuff like that. And yeah, swing by, is what I'm trying to say, and did get a copy of Mirror Mirror, right? And so yeah, shout out to everybody for LMH Publishing. But and if you ever pass through airport, normally international airport, and pass at the stop at the bookstore, most of the books in there is from LMH Publishing. But that conversation about the restaurant stuck with me. Is me trying to say, because like when he said nobody remember this and it was so big, you kind of feel sorry for me. And this is just something I always feel sorry for like persons who have lived through a time period and don't get their history documented properly. Which is this is the tale of like most West Indian history. You understand? Like Caribbean history is never given. It doesn't matter what niche it is, it's never given the level of sensitivity and the level of research necessary. This is niche history. So you're not gonna find what Mike Henry is talking about in like a business history book or like a fast food history book. It just we're always at the bottom of the pool. Always at the bottom of the pool. Is me I try to say. So, I went out to find what I could find about Nyamburgers. And yeah, I did find it, and it was pretty big. It was a really pretty big accomplishment and stuff like that. And I guess this was, as I said, this is part one of a part two episode. And you're gonna see how they're both connected next week. But this was kind of some kind of a thanks to Mike Henry for just like taking a chance on like some pretty young people, wanting to get information right and document information right about this particular incident, which you're gonna hear about next week. So yeah, that's basically the story behind this episode, where what we're gonna talk about specifically is business history, Jamaican business history, Caribbean business history, of how before we had the major, multi international fast food wings, KFC, Burger King, Popeyes, came and dominate Jamaican industry. There was a local franchise, Mike's, home of the famous Nyamburgers, like, and their legacy lies in the way that we do current marketing, the way we do promotion. Like, they laid the groundwork of what would become, the country's fast food industry. So, yeah, that's what we're gonna talk about, and yeah, make a start. All right, so I just want to lay the groundwork of who we're talking about, of who Mike Henry is, right? So Mike Henry was actually born Lester Mike Henry, who in most formal settings goes by his middle and surname. Mike Henry was born in Jamaica in 1935. Now, educated at St. Catherine Elementary School and Beckford and Smith, which is now known today as St. Jago High School, Mike journeyed to England to complete his tertiary education at Ealing Technical College. Now, getting his professional footing in publishing, he returned to the island in late 1960s and set his sights on the fast food industry. Now, at this point in the late 1960s, there were a number of fast food outlets on the island. Just wanted to get that out of the way, right? There were Tasty Limited, which was established in 1966, which carried patties. Then there was Tops, which was then located at 19 to 21 Halfway Tree Road, which would introduce many Jamaicans to international branded fast food. Right? In one advert that was found published in the Gleaner in February 5th, 1967, the establishment announced their special KFC dinner, which include 3 large pieces of Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, and Grace ketchup packets. Also on the menu was KFC Whopper Burger. And notably, this special menu announcement was around the same time that Colonel Sanders, the founder of KFC, was visiting the island on a 4-day trip. Yeah, and Tops, was very instrumental in like, you know, introducing Jamaica to KFC. Jamaicans are pretty, we know the relationship between Jamaica and KFC and stereotypes and what's not. And, Tops was very instrumental in being one of the first places in Jamaica where you could get KFC, right? However, Mike Henry was looking to disrupt the local fast food industry with something different, right? What he wanted was a franchise that catered to the local market specifically, right? And most importantly, this was a franchise that was distinctly Jamaican. And with this vision in mind, Mike's home of the famous Nyamburgers was born. Mike's and his Nyamburgers sure get around started the advertisement of Mike's published in the Daily Gleaner on September 4th, 1971. Now, the breadwinner of the restaurant chain was its burger, which was affectionately called the Ginal. Alongside the burger came a packet of French fries, a salad, and a slice of watermelon. Their special menu was a burger and everything else it came with, a soup, a dessert, and a beverage option of either coffee, tea, or a Coke. There was also the soda fountain, which carried a variety of ice creams, and the Mike's Fruit Melba, which the company boasted nobody on the island could finish. So as you notice, I'm going to be referencing the Gleaner a lot because a lot of the research material that I used to write this episode was from first point sources, newspapers and such, and what I remember from our conversation with Mike Henry. Again, but not document this. As me I try to say, we know our business history in a major business book. As me I try to say, we have to, again, bottom of the pole. You understand? Now, Mike's was also known for its Sunday breakfast menu, which was dubbed the Sunday Morning Rundown. The menu consisted of mackerel and banana, saltfish and ackee, and the ginal. They also offered bami with deep fried kingfish and excavie sauce. Alongside this, all patrons on Sunday received free newspapers. However, Mike Henry did not just want a restaurant. As I said before, Mike Henry, I think, big. You understand? He wanted a franchise. And so by the end of 1971, Mike's had two restaurants under his ever-expanding enterprise. One located at Kingston Arcade and the other at Spanish Court. And by the end of the year, a third branch was at The Village. Now, the Village branch was the largest of the three, and to garner publicity, the company went on a unique marketing spree to spread the word. As I said before, the kind of marketing that they were doing, you kind of see it in the way other fast food franchises would go about marketing to Jamaicans in years after, right? So, to market the Village, what they really feed on was Mike's, like, they already had a good public relations with the general public. Because like the previous year in December 1970, they sponsored the Kingston Christmas tree lighting ceremony. So, persons kind of like know, even if they never like, eat them food, about them somewhat. So they kind of feeding for this. Where for the grand opening of the Village branch, the company increased their adverts in the island's leading newspapers and offered the following to patrons on opening day. So what they offered was that 25 lucky persons would win 1 week's free lunch, 50 lucky persons winning dinners for two, 225 persons winning free Nyamburgers, and 300 lucky persons winning free Cokes. However, what made Mike's revolutionary at the time, like what made them, the talk about fast food entity, on the island, especially in Kingston, was that it had a 24-hour opening policy. And it is with this, which should make the franchise very popular with the residents of Kingston and St. Andrew. You understand? Specifically, the young populate. You understand? The young people in the corporate area. Because remember, at the turn of the decade, right, the rise of reggae and sound system culture led to more street dances throughout the corporate area. And coming from these parties, young persons could satisfy their late night cravings at Mike's, right? And with the rising popularity as one of the most talked about fast food spots in Jamaica in the early 1970s, the establishment not only garnered support from the public, but was endorsed by a number of notable businesses at this time. So we had endorsement from Containers Company Limited, Benson and Hodges, Grace Foods, Joe Bank Services, Corporate Services Limited, Diversity Jamaica, and Feathers Air Conditioners. You understand? So just like everybody was just like, everybody that does feed off of each other, and I give this restaurant support. Again, they were like, this was never been done before on the island, and they were trying to like carve out something very distinctively. And that was what Mike Henry plan was. And as I said before, when I spoke to him back in 2021, Mike Henry stated that the plan in 1972, going into 1972, the plan was to further expand the business. You understand? And this expansion was not only limited to Jamaica and to expand outside of the Kingston and St. Andrew metropolitan area, but them I look towards the Caribbean. You see me? And even European markets. You see? And, Mike, when I talked to Mike Henry, what he was saying is that what he was looking forward to was to put Jamaica cuisine and, entrepreneurship on a global map, on a global scale. Cool? But because this is 1972, something else happened that year. As 1972 was the year that Michael Manley came to power, right? And soon after, a new government initiative to benefit the nation's agriculture and manufacturing sector was announced, right? And the highlight of this initiative was Operation Grow. Eat what you grow and grow what you eat. And in summary, this policy, which, most persons my age would have know about it because it got brought back by the Jamaican government under the theme Eat Jamaica. That was when Christopher Tufton, Dr. Christopher Tufton was in charge of agriculture, I believe. They brought that back initiative, but it was coming from the Manley era, right? And in the 1970s, the main purpose of this Operation Grow initiative was to drive local intervention and to expand the agriculture and manufacturing sector, where one of the highlights of this program was food farms, right? Which the Manley-run government would pour investment in to up local food production and provide jobs, right? Another highlight of this policy was the prohibition of certain foreign-made goods into the island, right? And it is with this that the government had the intention for Jamaican businesses to find local alternatives to foreign-made goods. Now, on another Lest You Forget podcast episode, the history of Jamaica's love affair with Clark. So we talk about Jamaica relationship with the shoes brand Clark's. We spoke on how, because of the Operation Grow policy, Clark's, a foreign-made shoes brand, was not allowed to be imported on the island in the 1970s. That no mean say the shoes never did come into the island. That no mean say the shoes never did come into the island. You see me, I try to say, just because it was a foreign-made shoes, there's always a difficulty. You see me, I try to say, getting it in. You understand? A bunch of things were on the list. You see me, I try to say, but as I said on that episode, that did still not stop persons from getting the shoes into the island. And, they were so good at it that it initially drove up demand and further the popularity of the shoe. As I said on that episode, one of the ways persons were getting shoes in Jamaica, because it became difficult passing the shoe off, was they made stuff it in coffin boxes, according to the head of Clark's production at the time. So yeah, you can go ahead and listen to that episode. We spoke a bit more and how persons are trying to find ways around this Operation Grow policy, right? However, Mike Henry was not so lucky, right? And according, to him, the policy affected his business as local production could not meet his demand, as well as the fact that he had difficulty finding local alternatives for many of the restaurants' inventory. As such, instead of his grand plans of expansion, he had to downscale. To the T. You understand? And it's just like he had to downscale until ultimately he had to just close the entire franchise. Is me I try to say? And that's really the rise and fall of Mike's, home of the Famous Nyamburgers, is it? And probably why you have never heard about it. I never heard about it until 2021, from the man himself. And but this is the thing, despite the franchise going out of business by the mid-1970s, Mike Henry's entrepreneurship legacy would do something even more important, exposing the local demand for a fast food franchise, which I did, say up top that the marketing that they lay, they showcase the demand that Jamaicans had for these kind of foods. You understand? And no matter what your opinion is on the fast food industry, and whatever reason there is, you can't take away that from his legacy, right? So exposing the local demand for fast food industry, fast food franchise on the island, by June 1976, the Restaurant of Jamaica was established by the Myers family. And under a license from Hublin International, the company officially opened the island's first KFC branch at 170 Hollope Road in Kingston 6. You understand? Almost a decade after, Tops became one of the first, local entity to introduce Jamaicans to KFC, right? Now, by the turn of the 1980s, other local entrepreneurship would seek inspiration from Mike Henry endeavors. In 1980, under the supervision of Juki Chin, hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Juicy Patties opened their first store in Maypen, Clarendon under the name Juicy Beef Patties. By 1986, there would be additional Juicy location in St. Elizabeth, Manchester, and St. Catherine. The 1980s also saw the popular King Burger restaurant rose to prominence, right? Then in 1984, following the steps of KFC, global brand Burger King made their way to the island, where they opened their first branch on Main Street in Ocherius, right? Now today, other international fast food giants have set up shop on the island. And for this piece of information, shout out to Tiffany. Is me I try to say, shout out to Tiffany. Shout out to Yushin. I got this information from them, from Tiffany. So big up Tiff. So as of December 2025, right, there are 42 KFC locations in Jamaica, 31 Burger King, 18 Domino's, 17 Popeyes Louisiana Kitchens, 14 Pizza Huts, 11 Little Caesars, 12 Starbucks, 9 Wendy's, 8 Chester's Chicken, 5 Krispy Kreme, 5 Subways, and 1 Church's Chicken. So plenty international, plenty international giants around the island currently. And then as for some local franchise present, there are 63 Juicy Patties, 25 Tasties, 23 Mothers, 18 Island Grill, 4 Bird Shack, and 4 Chicken and Things. There's also Falmouth Chicken, which in recent years have expanded in Western Jamaica. You see, so, everybody I get them slice of the pie, you see? Still, as I said before, what all of these have in common is the marketing and entrepreneurship legacy left by Mike's, home of the famous Nyamburgers. You understand? Everything go back to him, you see? And one local company in particular, Juicy Patties, have personified Mike Henry's dream, where they have expanded their franchise internationally with several outlets in the United States. You understand? So Mike Henry dream never materialized, but another local, franchise got it done. So, a win is a win. A win is a win. As for Mike Henry, the funkness of Mike's is a heartbreaking, it's a heartbreaking story. Because I remember when he was telling us, I can say it was like one part sadness that the restaurant failed in the way that it did, but there's another thing that nobody remembered it. You see me I try to say? Like, nobody remembered it. You see it? And, again before, it's very heartbreaking, and he still carries it today. You understand? Like, I can tell you from a first person narrative, the conversation I had with him is something that he still carries today. You understand? But, that entire situation did lead to new opportunities. One of which was the establishing of his now successful publishing house, LMH Publishing. As I said up top, when you pass through the airport, Normal Airport, when you stop at a bookstore, most of the books in there is from, is published under his publishing house. But it also led to a career in politics, you understand, which that's where most Jamaicans know Mike Henry's name. You understand? As Mike Henry will relate to us, due to the initial success of his restaurant, he was approached by Derek Mahfood to enter politics. And by the mid-1970s, he would join the Jamaica Labour Party and soon after was selected as the party's candidate for the Central Clarendon seat in the 1976 election. And during that campaign, a series of events surrounding Mike Henry took place that will completely change Jamaican society. You understand? And that history, we're going to explore on the next episode of the Let's We Forget podcast. You understand? I'm saying before. This is a part 1 of a part 2 series. That entire story is wild. And you're going to hear it next week. Understand? Still, if there's anything to take away from this episode, it is that before the foreign fast food juggernauts of KFC, Burger King, Popeyes, Wendy's, before all of these, entities came, along with others, came and dominate the island's fast food industry, there was Jamaica's very own Mike's, home of the famous Nyamburgers.
And with that, we call an end to this episode. To view sources and or recommendations to learn more, visit our website at tenementyardmedia.com. A transcript of the episode will be available 5 days after it has been posted to podcast outlets. Follow our social media pages at tenementyard_ on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and now Blue Sky to view additional posts on this and other topics, as well as other content created by The Yard. A quick note before I go, we're on Patreon, patreon.com/tenementyardmedia. You can support the show with a monthly donation of your choice at tenementyardmedia.com. Until next time, this has been Lest We Forget, a historical podcast by Tenement Yard Media. Walk good!